This afternoon, the President is looking forward to officially announcing the new chairman of his Board of Advisors for the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities. Johnny C. Taylor, Jr., who will be taking on this important role, is the former president of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund and is currently CEO of the Society for Human Resource Management. As you all know, the President previously signed an executive order promoting excellence and innovation at HBCUs. He believes this initiative will advance America's full human potential, and with today's announcement, he continues to demonstrate his commitment to HBCUs. Before taking your questions, I want to take a moment to highlight the historic obstruction by Senate Democrats, an issue that represents a threat to America's interests and security. Compared to the 4 previous administrations, this Senate has confirmed the fewest nominees. Senator Schumer's tactics have led to 73 fewer confirmations than the next closest administration. Half of President Trump's nominees are still waiting for confirmation in the Senate. The obstruction is so out of control, even some Senate Democrats believe it is inappropriate. Senator Amy Klobuchar, a Democrat from Minnesota, said, quote, "I don't believe we should be holding nominees hostage. Enough is enough. We need people who are qualified to fill these important positions in our government. In the coming days, we'll be highlighting specific qualified nominees who are, as the senator said, being held hostage by Senator Schumer. Take, for instance, Rick Grenell, the president's nominee to serve as ambassador to Germany. Mr. Grenell, a Harvard-educated, experienced diplomat, was the longest-serving U.S. spokesperson at the United Nations. He was nominated in September of last year. He was reported out of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee with bipartisan support. He is waiting to represent America's interest and be our country's top voice in a G7 country." In short, Senator Schumer's hyper-political delay on Mr. Grenell puts our national security and America's foreign policy interests in jeopardy. The Senate should move to confirm him immediately. We will continue highlighting more of these examples of Democrat obstruction in the days ahead. Finally, I'm sure, on a lighter note, I'm sure you all remember 11-year-old Natalie Dalton, who wrote into the President offering to cook for him. We're excited to announce today that Natalie and her 8-year-old cousin Celia will be coming to the White House on March 23rd to work with the White House kitchen staff. We look forward to hosting them, and with that, I will take your...
To follow up on what Margaret was asking, Joseph Yoon, the State Department's envoy to North Korea, is retiring. How does that impact the diplomatic process?
Look, we're going to continue appointing people to different positions, whether it's the ambassador of South Korea and a number of other positions. I don't have any specific announcements on it at this time.
Secondly, the Chinese economic minister is here for trade talks. As you consider tariffs on steel and aluminum, what do you hope to hear from this fellow?
He's meeting with a few different members of the administration, but not the president directly. I don't have any specific readouts from any of his meetings at this point.
Sarah, thank you very much. House Speaker Ryan today disagreed with the president on arming teachers. He says he thinks it should be up to the locals whether teachers should be armed. What is the president's response to not having support from the Republican leader of the House?
Look, as we've said, this is something that will continue to be part of the discussion with state, federal, and local officials, as well as law enforcement. The president's going to be meeting with bipartisan lawmakers tomorrow, and that'll be another one of those topics discussed, and we'll have further specific policy announcements later this week.
But without the support of Speaker Ryan, how can this get any traction in the House?
Again, this is part of an ongoing conversation. It's something that the president still supports. It's something he knows that there are a lot of differing views on. It's one of the topics that we expect to come up tomorrow, and we're going to continue having that discussion. I think the number one thing that we're looking at is every possible action that we can take that helps protect the safety and security of the school kids across this country. We're going to look at everything we can. A lot of those things that you guys have brought up today will be part of the discussion tomorrow, and we expect to have some specific policy proposals later this week. Steve.
Yes, Sarah, today the White House announced that it's cutting about $8 million in aid to Cambodia for what it calls recent setbacks in democracy there. Can you talk a little bit about what went into this decision and why specifically just Cambodia and not other countries where there have also been recent setbacks to democracy, such as neighbor Thailand? The elections that happened earlier this month failed to represent the
the genuine will of the Cambodian people. That gave us great cause for concern. These setbacks compelled the United States to review that assistance. Based on the review, the government will suspend or curtail several assistance programs intended to support the Cambodian government. I don't have anything further at this point. Anita?
Two questions on two different topics. First, does President Trump believe that the governor of Missouri, who, as you know, has been indicted, should resign?
I haven't spoken with him about that.
Okay, can you go back to his...
But my guess is that he would refer to the people of the state of Missouri, but I haven't spoken directly with him, so I have to get back to
The
you.
president's the leader of the Republican Party, and obviously the governor's
well aware.
Republican. Well, I mean, he's a Republican.
Anita, I haven't spoken with him. I'd have to ask
Go
him.
back to me on that?
Sure.
Okay, second question. The president's having several meetings, as you mentioned, with lawmakers of both parties this week on other topics. Is he going to be talking to them about immigration? His deadline that he set, March 5th, is next Monday. Congress is nowhere near doing anything about that. Is that still the deadline? Is he encouraging them to get something done?
Absolutely, he's encouraging them to get something done. That's why he laid out exactly what he expected to see in a proposal that would not only help solve the DACA problem, but also provide border security. The president went above and beyond what previous administrations have done and offered on that program. It's really sad that Democrats are not willing to come to the table, get something done, and actually fix problems and do their job. But the president is still hopeful, and we're going to continue pushing forward and hope we get something done.
What's going to happen on Monday when the deadline comes?
Again, we're still hopeful that something happens on this and that Congress will actually do its job. Olivia?
Thank you, Sarah. I've got a couple for you as well. One on North Korea. Joseph Yoon, who's sort of the point person for North Korea policies, announced he's leaving. Does the president plan to replace him?
I don't have any personnel announcements at this time.
And then we're heading into the midterm election year, obviously. Have White House staff been briefed on the do's and don'ts of political activity, including the prohibition on using formal titles in campaign literature?
I know for sure that cabinet and senior staff have been, and I believe a paper memo was distributed to all staff, but I'd have to verify that to be sure. But I know that both cabinet and senior staff have been briefed on upcoming midterm elections and what they are allowed to do and not do.
Thank you, Sarah. Does the president believe someone who's on the no-fly list because of suspected terrorist activity should be able to buy a gun?
We haven't spoken about that specifically and don't have any policy announcement on that front.
I know I want a policy announcement. I just want to know if he thinks
Well,
that
that would be
somebody
a
on this.
policy, whether or not the president supports something or not would be a
He
policy.
doesn't know?
I said I haven't spoken with him about it, so I'd have to get back to you. John?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Two brief questions. One, I know it's been announced the president.
He's closer to
That was such
I
a
know,
good
I
timing.
noticed that too. I mean, you're moving up in the world, John, and it scares your colleagues, I think. They're making them nervous.
That was just such great timing. He sat down and you called him right there.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Anita.
You're welcome.
Got a lot of support, John.
Yeah. Reverend Billy Graham's funeral is this Friday. We know the president will attend. Has it been determined whether he'll make any remarks, any of the eulogies, or will he be just there as a mourner and family friend?
I'm not sure on the specifics. I do know he plans to attend there as well as head to the Capitol tomorrow for that stop.
The other
But in terms
question-
of specific remarks, I don't have any comment on that at this point.
My other question is that the president's two immediate predecessors did a lot to build and expand the faith-based programs within the White House and throughout the executive branch of government. Many governors followed that example, among them your father. It has been said that this president has not followed through on that there is no faith-based office within the White House now. Your reaction?
Look, I don't think an office is what determines the faith of the administration. I think that we have a number of
Program.
people. Right. I think that's something that the president has a faith council and a advisory council that regularly come to the White House and meet with. But I think in terms of whether or not you have an office doesn't determine the faith of the administration. I think we probably have actually more people front and center speaking openly about their faith and advocating and helping build on that foundation than probably any previous administration has. Francesca?
Thank you, Sarah. You've mentioned several times that you expect to have some policy announcements later this week. Just want to follow up on that and clarify. Are you saying that this week the White House will have a specific list that would be detailed or an outline of the specific policies that the president would like to see in legislation on gun control, gun violence prevention? Is that what you're saying?
Specific to school safety, yes, we expect that there will be some policy proposals that will be out by the end of the week. As I've noted a couple yesterday that the president has already voiced and the administration have voiced support for, both the Cornyn legislation as well as the Stop Gun Violence Act. Both are pieces of legislation that the administration supports.
Following up on that, though, you've also said that before the president can support some of those things, he'd like to see what's in the legislative text of those bills. We've talked about universal background checks in here before, but one of the two senators of this bipartisan bill who would be putting this forward says that they're not going to put that back forward until they're certain that they have the president's support for something like that. So conceptually, does the president support the idea of universal background checks, and would he be willing to support Senator Manchin and Senator Toomey's legislation on that?
At this time, the president, the only two specific pieces of legislation that we are announcing support for, the two that I just mentioned. Anything further will come later this week. The president, as I've said, expects to meet with a number of lawmakers tomorrow from both sides of the aisle, and we'll have some more information about specifics after that. Blake?
Thank you. I want to ask you what's happening in Georgia as it relates to Delta Airlines. The background, as I'm sure you know, they withdrew benefits for NRA members, and now the lieutenant governor there is saying that maybe there should be a tax break for Delta. The lieutenant governor said, quote, "Corporations cannot attack conservatives and expect us not to fight back." On the narrow front, does the White House believe that conservatives are under attack in the state of Georgia? And more broadly, does the president think it's a good idea for a state government to target a business for retribution for decisions that the business decides that it wants to make?
The administration is focused, when it comes to this conversation, on what we can do to help the safety and security of America's children. That's our focus. We're not weighing into other sidebar conversations right now. Hallie?
Sarah, thanks. I want to ask you about Syria and some developments there, but just two quick clarifications. To Justin's point, when he asked about whether the White House will meet the deadline tomorrow from House Oversight, it sounded like you said you'd let us know when you review it, but Trey Gowdy made that request 2 weeks ago. Have you guys not?
I said I would let you know and get back to you, that we don't have any announcement on that at this front.
And then on John, just to clarify on Jonathan's question here, just simply yes or no, will the president give the authority to Mike Rogers to seek additional authorities to go after Russia?
I'm not going to get ahead of any specific direction by the president, but I can tell you that we are looking at a number of different things that we can do to prevent this from happening, and we're going to continue to be tough on Russia moving forward, just as we have been in this first year.
Okay, and on Syria, Sarah, and it sounds like you're open to doing that. The president's open to those additional authorities?
Open to, I'm sorry, what did you say?
Additional authorities?
The president is open to looking at a number of different ways of making sure that Russia doesn't meddle in our elections.
Speaking of international relations, does the United States have reason to believe that North Korea is linked to Syria's chemical weapons program?
I don't have any comment on that at this point.
Sarah.
Take the last
Sarah.
question, Mike.
Just one quick one. First, I want to just button up Steve's question about Lou Ha. You said he's meeting with some administration officials. Do you know who he's meeting with?
We'll get back to you on the specifics of who he's meeting.
The president mentioned last week that...
But I know it's not the president, I can tell you that.
Okay. The president mentioned last week that John Kelly has a decision to make about Jared Kushner's security clearance. I know your policy on not talking about security clearances, except really in the case of Kushner. You guys have talked about him quite a bit. Has the chief of staff made a decision on John Kelly, and can you say what it is?
As I said earlier, we do not comment on individual security clearances. We actually haven't commented on Jared's, as you indicated, but we have commented on his ability to do his job, which he's a valued member of the team, and he will continue to do the important work that he's been doing since he started in the administration. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great afternoon.